How long since you've seen your mother?
Well, I haven't seen her very much, no. And you see, I stopped seeing my mother shortly after I married Vincent because it was just too. She just got impossible, just impossible. It was. I saw after I had the baby, she saw Liza a lot, and then it was just she just became so deeply neurotic that it made me ill to be around her.
What did she do specifically?
Well, things like that, and she'd call me.
Oh, all right, come on, let's get back to this. She called you at night many times and said you had a brain defect.
Yes, a very quiet voice, you know.
You'd have would be to have an operation.
Yes.
Right.
And I never heard from my sisters.
You never heard from
No, never heard from anybody. So, one day I just...
No one else called you all during this period?
Not a soul.
Not a soul at all?
Not a soul.
You were out at the royal wedding, you were just up there in the house in the bedroom by yourself?
Carlton, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the only one that called you was
Carlton and Sylvia.
Carlton and Sylvia.
They were really standing by. They had been for quite a while since I had been ill, you know.
And Carlton used to come up and see you there?
Carlton was there all the time.
Oh, he was?
Yes. And...
well, he was in the studio at the time, wasn't he? He was working in the studio.
No.
No?
This was after he had worked at the studio. But he just believed in me, you know, and he hated what they were doing to me. And I remember after I was fired from Barclays at Broadway, Sylvia took me down into her house on Beverly Drive because that house on the hill was so lonely. And she moved me into her bed and cooked for me and fed me and, you know, was just wonderful to me, and Carlton too. But after the second thing, I was in bed in my own house, and Carlton was always there. But when the press kept pounding away at me every day in the newspapers and on the front page, one day I just thought, between the calls from my mother, no help from my husband, no telephone calls from a soul, I just thought, I can't take anymore. So I, in a burst of complete irrationality, or however you pronounce it, irrationalness, or whatever you call it, I just...
what time of the day do you remember? Was it the
Yes,
day?
it was morning. It was right after the morning papers had come in, and nobody was there.
The morning papers, and you were all alone.
Yeah.
Another blast about you in the papers.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
you went to the bathroom.
I went into the bathroom, and I took a razor, and
You locked the door.
I locked the door.
Yeah.
And I cut my
Cut
throat.
your tinsel.
And,
Then what happened?
I just went into bed and laid down. And I thought, and I got weaker and weaker.
You're bleeding.
Yeah, I was blood all over the place. And so the cook came in, just happened to come in.
What did you feel at the time, Judy? I'm trying to get...
Nothing, I just wanted to go to sleep.
You just wanted to go to
I
sleep?
just wanted to go to sleep.
To go, that's all.
Yeah, I just wanted to go to sleep. And so she was horrified. She called the doctor. And the doctor.
She came into the bedroom and saw you there.
Yes. So the doctor...
Whom did she call? What doctor do you remember?
Dr. Schulman, I think it was. I forget.
Yeah.
There were a series of doctors.
All the doctor, yeah.
And he came up and Carlton, the nurse got in touch with Carlton and with Vincent, and Vincent got in touch with Vincent. Vincent called Carlton, and he came up. And anyway, they kept me out of the hospital and out of, there was no publicity about it. So...
There was no publicity at all about it?
Not then.
No.
So, I went through a terrific feeling of guilt and an awful shame after trying that, you know, because actually I didn't want to die. I had a baby to live for. It was just that the pressure had been too much for a minute, you know, and I had heard this doctor say that I was suicidal. My mother said there was something wrong with my brain, and it was just too much for me. So afterwards, I forget what I did. I just then that whole scandal with Jimmy Tarantino, the Hollywood nightlife started. You know, calling me a drug addict, and which was just a little scandal sheet here in town. But it was a terrible thing in this town because people really stayed away from me as though I were a leper then, you know.
That came right on top of your suicide.
Yes, and as soon as I recovered...
Did he mention the suicide at all in the thing?
No.
He didn't know. Nobody
knew about that.
No, or anything. And he kept saying that you were a dope addict.
Yeah, something rather dope addict. And I remember Arthur Freed saying to me, "Oh, kid, you know, this is after I recovered from my attempted suicide. I was just getting back on my feet. Of course, the first thing Carlton did is say, you've got to get out of this house, and you've got to go right down to Romanoff's with me for lunch and walk in and just face the whole damn town and let them see you because you look fine, and let them know that you're not some kind of a nut the way they printed in the paper." So he started taking me out. And
how soon afterward was this?
As soon as I got out of bed.
Which you say, a couple of weeks?
No, 3 or 4 days.
3 or 4 days.
Yeah, I even had a bandage on my neck. I was wearing tall collars.
In other words, he just shook you
Yes,
up and
he said, come on. So he took me everywhere. Nobody would come to our table, though.
Nobody came to your table?
No. And when I'd walk in, there'd be a kind of a hush that would fall over the room. The only one who would come to the table and who was marvelous was Mike Romanoff. And he always came over and never mentioned anything, just kept telling me. He always has an expression for me, which is a great dame. He always calls me a great dame. So, but I kept going out, and Carlton and Sylvia were a tremendous help to me. So finally, after a while, Metro called me in and said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "I feel great." And I didn't. I still wasn't right. You see, I still hadn't had my year or 6 months off. I probably had about, I'd say about 3 months.
How was your weight at this time?
About 100 pounds. And so they bought Annie Get Your Gun for me. And there was an enormous fanfare because they paid more money for that than they had ever paid for any studio had ever paid for.
Did they tell you that they were thinking of buying the property for you?
Not much, no. They didn't say much to me. They just informed me that they had.
Oh, they had bought it.
Yeah. So Irving Berlin came out. There were pictures in all the papers and big announcements with Berlin and Freed and myself that I was going to do Annie Get Your Gun. So I started rehearsals. And I was still very tired and a very distressed woman. And I remember I started to, the first thing that happened was I started to lose my hair. My hairline started to recede badly. And, but I went through all the rehearsals and all the costume fittings. And unfortunately, they put Buzz Berkeley on the picture. Now, I think he's a wonderful director. I mean, I think he did a fine job with the earlier pictures. But psychologically, Buzz Berkeley represented all of the years of of Benzedrine to work as hard as we were.